Good day everyone, Abyss full of goats here and welcome back to Goat Guides, the series where I occasionally live up to this channel's namesake and analyse the many decks and strategies of the once most popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro format. So for our first time back in a while we're going to do something quite spicy, a deck primarily focused around dark monsters and banishing, and it's not lame as hell. Everyone, let me introduce you to Strike Ninja. A monster probably better known for his appearances in Dungeon Dice monsters, Strike Ninja in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a 1700 attack Dark Warrior, good start, with an interesting effect. At the cost of banishing 2 darks from the grave, Strike Ninja can banish himself until the end of turn, and did I mention that can be done during any time during either player's turn? So as you can imagine, this makes Strike Ninja a very hard card to kill, as long as your grave is full of darks. And a deck built around both dark monsters and banishing cards, as we've seen with other decks like Chaos, can be very powerful if built well. So let's see what we can do with this, shall we? So essentially what we're going to do is build a deck around this effect, full of dark monsters to banish and effects to take advantage of said banishing. This will come in the form of cards that benefit from being banished themselves, and the powerful game-ending effect of return from a different dimension. In addition to this, we're also going to play as many good dark cards as possible to both set up our grave and win in other ways if we don't draw Strike Ninja. In addition to Strike Ninja, first up we have DD Scout Plane, an earned rare attack level 3 that once per turn can summon itself to the field from the banish zone. Now while its stats aren't anything to write home about, the fact that this guy can repeatedly be used as fodder for Strike Ninja makes him an auto-include in this deck, as it can allow us to stall longer while switching for a win con, as we can summon him, tank a hit, banish him with Ninja, and then repeat the process the next turn until we either have a strong field or a game-winning return. In addition to this, Scout Plane is also essentially a banished version of Treeborn Frog, and that it can be repeatable tribute fodder for the many dark tribute monsters we run in this deck, or the Morlock monsters if you want to run them over the cards I'm going to suggest in this video. Now after the Ninja himself and Scout Plane, the next thing we're going to want to run are a steady string of monsters that we can fill up the graveyard with, and the best ones for the job are recruiter cards, or monsters that summon or search another monsters to replace themselves when they're destroyed. This will allow us to stall the game while we're searching up our combo pieces, thin the deck out and create a lot of fodder for Strike Ninja's effect. As such, we play a ton of these recruiters in this deck, more than most GOAT decks do. First up is obviously Mystic Tomato, the dark recruiter from the same group as UFO Turtle and Shining Angel, in that he can summon any dark with 1500 or less attack to the field when destroyed in battle. Now this does allow us to access Scout Plane more easily, and a few other cards we'll mention in a bit, but its main use in this deck is in filtering through all 3 copies of himself to both thin our deck by 3 cards and give us 3 more monsters to banish with Strike Ninja. In a similar vein, we also run 3 copies of a friend from an old GOAT guide, Gravekeeper's Spy, which those don't know is a 2000 defense dark spellcaster that upon flip can summon any Gravekeeper with 1500 or less attack from the deck. Now like Tomato, this card can also be used to filter through our deck and fill up our grave. However, in addition to this, she also gives you a 2k wall that the opponent might find hard to punch over, and possibly a removal piece if you want to run the Gravekeeper's Guard along with her for a small Gravekeeper's engine. Finally, we run the mandatory Sangan, as it searches 90% of this deck other than Ninja himself. You could also run Apprentice Magician and Giant Jim if you want to really max out on recruiters in this deck. However, as none of them can get a Strike Ninja himself, I think personally you're better off diversifying your deck thinners with the next section of this video. Outside of the recruiters, we also need ways of finding the Ninja himself, so we also run several monsters that draw us cards in the form of Dekoichi and Dark Mimic level 3. Both dark monsters that allow us to draw a card upon flip summon, essentially allowing us to dig 1 card deeper for Ninja in our deck, while also replacing themselves, meaning we don't lose any card advantage from playing them. Again, we run these or more recruiters, but I believe this is the best way to go in Strike Ninja decks, because we need more ways of guaranteeing the Ninja himself enters our hand for most of our combos. So we have our deck's main engine and the fuel for said engine, so where's the big payoff for all this? Well, obviously the biggest payoff is an OTK using Return from Different Dimension, but we'll cover that more in the trap section. However, another way we can run with this deck is using the monsters we play as fuel for big, dark tribute monsters. First up we have Jinzo, a level 6 dark machine that in addition to having 2500 attack, prevents both players from activating any trap cards. Now it is true that Jinzo is one of the best dark tributes we can run in GOAT, as it essentially turns off a third of the game, and has massive stats for a 1 tribute monster. In addition to this, he's also really good in aggro decks like this, as we want a clear field to attack as often as possible, and shutting down cards like Mirror Force is very important. However, be warned that playing this will also shut down your own traps, making cards like Return from the Living Dimension potential bricks in your hand. So you want to consider siding this guy instead of maining him if you're focusing heavily on the return plan. Second up, we have Mephis the Infernal General, an 800 attack 1 tribute that makes up for his low stats with a powerful effect. Essentially a reverse Air Knight Parshath, Mephis delivers piercing damage upon attacking, making him an excellent card against goat tokens, chaos decks, and certain burn strategies. And when he does damage, he makes the opponent discard a card from their hand. As we've seen with the prevalence of cards like Trapdoor Shoot and Delinquent Duo in GOAT format, hand destruction is one of the most powerful things you can do in GOAT format, as it limits the opponent's resources, and it's also a way of dealing with threats we can't answer once they hit the field before they become a problem. So a card like this that does it every turn is definitely worth considering, even with his low attack stats. Next up we have Blowback Dragon, a level 6 machine with 2300 attack that once per turn allows you to toss 3 coins and then destroy 1 card in the field if at least 2 of those coins are heads. Now I have no idea what the odds are here, English degree here, not maths, but what I do know is that at its worst this card is a 2300 attack body, and at its best it can remove 1 card a turn, making it a much larger threat. Definitely something to consider in a deck that wants to run as many good dark cards as it can. Now those are the 3 main tributes people run here, however there is one other option I'd like to discuss, and that is Dark Ruler Hades, a level 6 dark with 2450 attack that negates the effects of any monster it battles. Now 2450 attack stat by itself should make this guy more played than he is currently, as in GOAT the only monster consistently outing this guy is BLS, as even Chaos Sork and the Monarchs can't take him on in a fair fight. However, the fact that this guy is a skill/soul drain to any monster he battles should in my view make this guy far more used than he currently is, as this effect essentially shuts down all floaters, all flip effects and any other grave effect the opponent might have, essentially neutering about half of the best monsters in the format, from Faith to Sangan. Honestly, if you haven't tried Hades yet, I'd highly recommend giving him a shot. Finally, we need to look at the utility monsters we run in this deck, which are usually powerful cards we can search off of many floaters and search cards. First up is Exiled Force, which can sacrifice himself to destroy 1 monster on the field. Quick and easy removal that is easily accessed in this deck with the 2 copies of Rotors we run as our only main deck to get Strike Ninja. Because of this, we can also run Mataza the Zapper, as not only is he searchable with Rotor and Sangan and a good attacker in an aggro deck, but he's also another dark we can banish for Ninja's effect. Speaking of 1-for-1 removal, we also run a single copy of Nudoria, a 1200 attack fiend that upon destruction can destroy any monster on the field, essentially making it a delayed Exile Force that can also be searched with Tomato and Sangan, making it in this deck possibly more powerful than Exile Force. Finally, for the monsters in this deck, we run GOAT staple Breaker the Magical Warrior as a way of clearing the way for attacks as another ninja banish target, and also Tsukiyomi, which is not only a great card to banish off ninja as she can't be revived anyway, but also a great way to both reuse after effects like the Koichi and Spy, but also for beating over big monsters like the Monarchs and Kaiku with cards like Strike Ninja. Moving on to our spell cards, I'll be brief here, as unlike our monsters and traps there isn't much unique or interesting to talk about. As expected in a deck with primarily Playmaker as a warrior, we run the 2 copies of Roto we're allowed to, which also lets us access cards like Exile Force for removal when we need them. Next up we run the aggro staple Book of Moon. Now while it is true that Strike Ninja is a very difficult card to remove once he's on the field, there will be some games where we either run out of darks to banish or need to protect another monster, and in those cases we have Book to quick play flip a monster face down, blanking an attack and possibly giving us another turn to fight back. In addition to this, there are plenty of big beaters in this format that Ninja can't out, like Breaker, Kaiku, Gorilla, etc. So having a card that puts these low defense monsters in a position where our deck's most played monster can run over them is very helpful and very welcome. Other than this, the deck spells usually aren't that unique. We run the Trinity to both fill our hand and deplete the opponent's, which helps us dig for Ninja, take out cards we can't stop, and in Grateful Soul Charity's case, fill our grave with more darks for Ninja's vanishing trick. We also run Heavy Storm, MST and Snatch Steal to clear the way for our attacks, and Noble Man of Crossouts to deal with flips like Jam Monsters and Magician of Faith. As this is an aggro deck that wants cards in the grave, there's an argument to be made here that we should also be running cards like Lightning Vortex, since it's both a board wipe that also discards cards. However, I personally don't run it, because we sometimes struggle to keep a large hand in this deck, and this card can be a nightmare top deck late game. However, I wouldn't say it can't work, so run it by preference. Finally, let's look at the trap lineup in this deck, because just because our opponent can't play most traps against us because Strike Ninja can dodge them all, doesn't mean we can't play them. First up, and most importantly, we have Return from the Different Dimension, literally the only good thing to come from the Yu-Gi-Oh movie. Now it does cost half your life points to activate, but as we've seen with Solemn Judgment, that's a price we're often willing to pay for powerful effects, and in this case it's as powerful as it gets, as we can special summon any number of the monsters we banished with Strike Ninja until the end of the turn, essentially making this card a one-card OTK. You could also make an argument for Dimension Fusion in this deck, however the reason the Return is played over it is its versatility. Because this card's a trap, you can use it at the most optimal time. So for example, if you've attacked into your opponent and wiped their board, you can then flip this during the battle phase and get a quick out of nowhere win. Again, some decks could run Dimension Fusion if you want to just get more options to get your banished cards back, however in my opinion I think 3 Return is enough. Next up we have probably the most interesting card on this list in Skull Lair. A continuous trap card, Skull Lair allows us to banish any number of cards from our graveyard, and then destroy a monster whose level equals the number of cards we banished. Now like I said, it's actually not guaranteed in this deck that we'll find Strike Ninja, and thus we need other ways of filling up the banish pile to fuel the game-ending return. In most Dark decks, the answer would be to run a Chaos package, however in this case that will not work as we really can't afford to dilute our Dark deck with the amount of lights required to fuel such an engine, and thus we run this card instead, which at worst will usually net at least one removal, but in a game where our grave is plentiful and we don't get Strike Ninja, it could be a field wipe in a can. The only downside to this card is that if you do draw both it and Ninja, the two are a non-bow, as both each are great for fuel and won't always have enough resources between them to both be played. Because of that, some decks do not run this card, but I think it's a good include just in case Ninja doesn't show up. Next we run the other major aggro deck staple in Solemn Judgment, a counter trap that for half your life points can negate one card from the opponent. Now the fact that Judgment is a one card no button for every card in GOAT, and that no matter how low your life gets you can always use it, some make it one of the best traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, unlike in my other aggro videos, this time I do want to issue a word of caution. In past videos like Gravekeepers and Warrior Toolbox, I have encouraged players to use this no matter what their life points are, as a free no to anything is always worth it in a deck that wins too fast for life to matter. However, in this deck I will say pick your moment more carefully, as not only are you running 3 of this in your deck, but you're also running 3 returns, one of which you likely need to win the game. As such, your life points will often get dangerously low in this deck, and one mistake could end your night in the blink of an eye. Am I saying don't play this aggressively? No, not at all. What I am saying is treat this card more like a tactical strike than a wild carpet bombing, and pick your moment very carefully. Outside of these unique cards to this deck, we run the usual staples of Ring of Destruction and Mirror Force to destroy big threats and beaters, and many builds also double down on this with 3 copies of Sakaretsu Armor. Now this makes sense as we are a deck focused primarily on Strike Ninja and small monsters, so we need ways to take care of big beaters and big boss monsters like BLS, Breaker, Kaiku, etc. In conclusion, Strike Ninja may not be the best deck in GOAT or even necessarily a top deck, but it's one of the most interesting brews we've seen in the format in a few years, and it's nice to know that a supposedly sold format like GOAT can still give us a surprise every once in a while, so we aren't all playing the same 3 decks every single game. I've been playing this deck a lot more myself recently, and I've had a lot of fun doing so, and I hope this video has encouraged some of you players to give it a try as well. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.